It is Thursday, and that means it's time for Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. She's here to break down the week's political headlines. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Giselle. It's great to see you.
Always great to see you. Let's start here. Vladimir Putin doubling down, now threatening to use chemical weapons on Ukraine. How does this change the response of the U.S. and that of our NATO allies?
Well, unfortunately, it can't change it much. NATO and the U.S. are trying to stay out of World War III. And I know it's difficult to kind of wrap our brains around this and grasp what is at stake here. But we don't want to be in a nuclear war. We don't want to be in a nuclear showdown. And the way we avoid that is by avoiding acts of war. And so what we can do in Ukraine is what we're already doing. We're providing supplies and resources and humanitarian aid in ways for folks to get out of the country. But other than that, we are pretty limited unless we want to get into a much larger global confrontation, and the Biden administration and NATO are trying to avoid that.
Yeah, but is there a red line here? Is there a breaking point when you're bombing maternity wards, women and children, and killing them in safe corridor escape routes? I mean, and now the threat of, not just nuclear war, but chemical warfare. Is there a breaking point here where the administration and NATO says, okay, we have to engage?
Well, Giselle, as you point out, I mean, the World Health Organization has confirmed 18 medical facilities have been targeted. Civilians, the targeting of civilians has ramped up. This is, beyond what we have seen in the modern age of war. We're going back to atrocities that we have not seen on, and now in the social media age. The red line is very clear. The red line is if Putin decides to go into a NATO country, then NATO and the U.S. and the EU and other bodies will respond. Until that point, I do not imagine that we'll do anything again because we don't want to escalate the situation into a potential nuclear conflict in World War III.
So you're an expert in politics and media, and with the whole world watching and seeing for themselves these horrific images, how long can Putin control the narrative in Russia? Do you see a Russian uprising as the greatest hope to stop Putin?
I think it's probably unlikely, mostly because he is able to control the messages that his people receive by and large. And I think the biggest thing standing in the way of a popular uprising would be his popularity. He is not an unpopular leader in Russia. Granted, tens of thousands of Russians have taken to the streets to protest what is happening in Ukraine. So some information is getting in. But by and large, Putin is controlling that message as he has for many decades. He's also controlling messaging on the global stage. This narrative that he's a madman, it's hard to say whether he is a madman or whether he wants us to believe he's a madman because it somehow gives him leverage. He is a master of manipulation and controlling messages, which of course controls attitudes, behaviors, and what humans do.
When we were at the edge of the nuclear missile crisis in '62, that threat died down through diplomacy, agreeing not to invade Cuba, to remove strategic missiles from Turkey. What kind of deal could you see that might avert this war?
Well, the big things on the table now are Crimea becoming a permanent part of Russia, annexing the separatist region, and also preventing Ukraine from joining NATO or the EU. At the end of the day, I don't know where the two parties might meet on that. I don't know if it's enough for Putin to just have Crimea and the annexed regions. I know that it is highly unlikely that Ukraine is going to agree to not join NATO after what they're experiencing right now. I think it would be foolhardy to make a deal with Putin that says, hey, you're closer to us, you could do this again, we're setting it, this is our negotiation for stopping what is happening right now. But it's worth saying that both sides are softening.
I have to ask you about this. Mexico not standing with the U.S., its #1 trading partner against Russia. The leadership of Mexican President Manuel López Obrador clearly resonated with Vladimir Putin. What should the U.S. response be here, Caroline? Some suggest we should be sanctioning our neighbor.
Well, we could, certainly, the Congress could do that. They're sending mixed messages. In the UN, Mexico called for a ceasefire, but you're right, the president is not condemning this attack. I'm assuming, like China, what we will see as the atrocities go further and Putin is further isolated economically, it doesn't make good political or economic sense for any of these countries to be throwing in with Putin. I'm imagining that Mexico and China will have more of an about face. In the meantime, we can put pressure on Mexico if the Congress decides to do that.
Right. I'm reminded of this quote by Al Gore. He said, if you knew what I knew, you wouldn't sleep at night. Do you think that's more true than ever?
Absolutely. I mean, the images, what little images and information we're getting out of Ukraine are absolutely horrific. And Putin did not anticipate that this would be broadcast globally, or at least he didn't anticipate it in a way that would have contained these images. So his ability to set the narrative while still there about his own country and his own actions, he doesn't get to control the narrative for others. And that is the power of social media in this war.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for your expert insight. We so appreciate it, as always. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
When we come right back, Russia's war is putting journalists and the industry in general under attack. Later this morning, we'll discuss efforts to keep journalists safe in the face of this horrific war. This is Your Morning on Spectrum News 1. We'll be right back.